The first time my sister carved the word help into her own skin, I was the one who found her. I was 19, home early from college for spring break. She was 16, sitting on the cold tile floor of our bathroom, Dad's razor in her trembling hand. Thin red lines stretched across her thighs in perfect, parallel cuts. Not random. Not sloppy. They spelled something clear, deliberate, horrifying, H-E-L-P. I froze. My stomach turned to stone. The smell of iron filled the air, sharp and metallic. My sister, Lily, looked up at me with wide, glassy eyes, like she already knew nobody was going to listen. When I showed our parents, Mom didn't even look away from her laptop. She sighed, the same sigh she'd give if I'd forgotten to close the fridge door. She's attention-seeking, she muttered, fingers still tapping her keyboard. Dad just adjusted his tie and grumbled, somebody's got to pay for this house. We don't have time for theatrics. That was the night I realized if Lily was going to survive, it was going to be because of me, not them. But to understand how she got to that point, you need to know what happened when she was 12. We grew up in Fairfield, Connecticut, in a sprawling white colonial house that our parents loved to brag about. The kind of neighborhood where lawns were trimmed like golf courses and everyone pretended nothing bad ever happened. Except something did happen. Something that broke my sister before she ever had a chance. One night, Lily was babysitting the neighbor's toddler. It should have been easy money, put the kid to bed, snack on some cereal, watch TV until the parents came home. But instead, she saw something that would haunt her forever. Their front door was forced open. She heard glass shatter. Voices raised. Then, screaming. From upstairs, she crammed herself and the baby into a closet, clamping her hand over the child's mouth to keep him quiet. She stayed there for 3 hours, listening while our neighbor's wife was murdered by her own husband during what police later called a domestic dispute turned violent. When she finally emerged, pale and shaking, she wasn't the same sister I knew. She couldn't sleep. She couldn't eat. Every sound made her flinch like she was back in that closet, waiting to be found. She begged our parents for therapy, for someone to help her untangle the nightmare. But they wouldn't hear it. You weren't the one who lived through it, Mom said coldly. The neighbors are the victims. You were just hiding. Dad added his favorite line, the one he used to shut down every problem in the house, somebody's got to pay for this lifestyle. Then he left for another late night at the office. And Lily? She was left alone with the panic that chewed her alive from the inside. By the time I found her in that bathroom 4 years later, the panic had turned into something sharper. Something lethal. I thought maybe I could fix it. I thought maybe love was enough. I pulled half my savings from my college account and bought us plane tickets, just me and her, to Alaska. It was impulsive, reckless. But Lily had always loved the ocean. She said waves drowned out the memories, that the sound of water was the only thing that ever silenced the screams in her head. For 2 weeks, I tried to give her that silence. We hiked. We kayaked. We spent hours at a rundown salvage yard run by an old fisherman named Walter. He had this weathered face and calloused hands, like he'd been carved out of the sea itself. Lily was obsessed with the place. With him. On our last night, Walter pulled me aside. He said, that girl has salt water in her veins. Keeping her on land is cruel. I thought he was just eccentric, some washed-up old sailor with too many stories. But Lily's eyes lit up in a way I hadn't seen in years. She clung to his words like they were prophecy. When we came back to Connecticut, she was different. She'd disappear for hours and come home with sand in her shoes, even though the nearest beach was 5 hours away. She stayed up all night watching boat restoration videos, scribbling diagrams into notebooks. She researched commercial fishing licenses. She sent me links to yachts for sale, to charts and maps, to weather prediction models. At dinner one night, she finally told our parents her dream: she wanted to live on a boat. To escape. To survive on her own terms. I'd never seen her so alive. And of course, they crushed it instantly. "You're not special," Mom sneered. "Millions of kids witness violence. They don't run away to Alaska." "Somebody's got to pay for this big house," Dad echoed, stabbing his steak with a knife. "We don't work 80-hour weeks so you can play sailor." Then they threw out her maps. Blocked sailing websites on our Wi-Fi. Treated her dream like it was trash. That night, I lay awake listening through the wall we shared. My sister sobbed until she had no voice left. The next morning, she didn't say a word to me. But something in her eyes had changed. And that was the beginning of the end. Because 3 weeks later, Lily vanished. But that's not the worst of it. Not even close. When Lily started giving away her things, I thought it was just another spiral. She sold her laptop. Donated her untouched designer clothes to charity. She even handed me her favorite sketchbook and just said, "You'll take care of this better than I would." And then one morning, I found her goodbye letter on my nightstand. It didn't feel like my sister's handwriting. It was too careful. Too neat. Almost deliberate. Like she wanted me to analyze it. She wrote that she was going into the ocean to drown. That at least if she died, she'd die surrounded by what she loved. She apologized for being weak. For not being the daughter our parents wanted. She even left little notes for people. A reminder for Mom about her mammogram. A message for our mail carrier, Mrs. Jenkins, thanking her for always waving. A line for me, "Take care of Marcus. He understands." I read it until the words blurred into nothing. The police searched for 2 weeks. They found her car abandoned at a desert trailhead outside Flagstaff. Inside, her wallet, her phone, her antidepressants in the glove compartment. But no body. No footprints. No sign of her on the trail. We held a funeral with an empty casket. Mom cried for the cameras, her mascara perfectly smudged for the occasion. Dad kept saying the same line, "We gave her too much freedom." As if control would have saved her. As if locking her down would have erased the nightmares. They quit their law firm after Dad had a breakdown during a deposition. Moved to Michigan. Bought a new house. Pretended Fairfield never happened. But me? I stayed. I couldn't let her go. I kept her letter in my nightstand, reading it every night like a ritual. For 3 years, I tortured myself with every line. And the more I read, the more the details didn't add up. Like the trailhead where her car was found, exactly 5. 2 nautical miles from our house. Not 5. Not 6. 5, 2. She'd circled that number over and over in her notebooks. And that trail? It didn't lead to a lake or a canyon like you'd expect. It led to a private airstrip from the 1960s. Abandoned. Not even on modern maps. It didn't feel like suicide. It felt like a message. I started digging. I went through her old browser history, what little was left. Found usernames she'd used on sailing forums. Posts about living off-grid. About restoring old boats. About disappearing. The letter haunted me most. The way paragraphs cut off mid-thought. The weird spacing. The random breaks. For years, I thought maybe I was seeing things, grief driving me insane. I tried everything. UV lights, chemical sprays, invisible ink tests. I even counted letters, numbers, punctuation. Nothing. Until one night, 5 years after she disappeared, it clicked. Old sailors had this way of hiding coordinates in plain sight, by using word counts. I counted the words in each paragraph of her letter. Converted them into decimals. And my heart nearly stopped. They formed GPS coordinates. Coordinates that pointed to a remote bay in southern Alaska. The same bay where Lily and I had gone kayaking on that trip. The same one Walter had called the place for souls with salt water in their veins. I booked the first flight I could find. My hand shook as I packed. Just one bag. warm clothes, a flashlight, and that letter that had consumed half a decade of my life. At the airport, I kept waiting for someone to stop me, to tell me I was crazy for chasing ghosts, to pull me back into the version of life where Lily was already gone. But no one stopped me. On the flight, I ran my fingers over her handwriting again. This time one phrase jumped out at me, one I'd ignored before. Salvage what remains. She'd written it twice. Once in the middle of a random paragraph. Once at the very end. And suddenly I remembered Walter. His salvage yard. I pulled out my laptop, desperate for Wi-Fi, and searched for salvage yards near those coordinates. Just one result popped up. Walter's. 5 years later. Same spot. Same name. When I landed in Anchorage, it was like no time had passed. The same stuffed grizzly bear stood in the arrivals area. The same stale smell of coffee and jet fuel filled the air. I walked to the rental car counter, rehearsing what I'd say to a stranger if I drove up to Walter's and asked about a girl who vanished years ago. And that's when I heard my name. A young man stood near the exit, nervously shifting his weight from foot to foot. He looked to be mid-20s, with the same weathered hands as Walter, calloused from years of boat work. When I walked closer, he tried to turn away. But I grabbed his sleeve. He knew me. I saw it instantly in his eyes. This was Walter's son. His name was Jack. And on his ring finger was a wedding band tied in a sailor's knot. The exact same knot Lily had once practiced over and over in her notebooks. Jack's face crumbled when I said her name. He admitted it. She'd been alive. For years. She'd sent him letters. Updates. Instructions. Sometimes once a month. Sometimes less. But always consistent. Always proof. Until 6 months ago. Then, nothing. The words hit me like a physical blow. She had been alive. All this time. Letting me grieve. Letting our parents bury an empty casket. And I didn't know if I should feel relieved or betrayed. Jack's wife stepped out of a truck then, watching us with sharp, protective eyes. Her name was Emily. And she looked at me like she already knew why I was here. She said, quietly but firmly, maybe she doesn't want to be found. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. If Lily was alive, she might be running from more than just our parents. I didn't sleep that first night in Anchorage. Jack's words echoed in my head, she's been alive all this time. I lay awake in a cheap motel bed, staring at the cracked ceiling, replaying every memory I had of my sister. One in particular kept clawing its way back, something I hadn't thought about in years. It was summer in Fairfield, and I was 10. Lily was just 7. We'd built a fort out of couch cushions and bed sheets in the living room. She crawled inside with a flashlight, clutching a seashell she'd found on a trip to Cape Cod. "This is our boat," she whispered. And out there, she pointed past the sheets, past the safety of our living room, is the storm. But as long as we stay inside, we're safe. That was Lily. Even as a kid, she dreamed of escape. She dreamed of building her own refuge. And now, years later, I was standing at the edge of that same dream. The next morning, Jack finally cracked. He admitted Lily had been using his father's salvage yard as a hub, collecting supplies, repairing boats, coordinating something bigger. Something he called the network. But his wife Emily was less forgiving. She crossed her arms and studied me like I was a threat. "You think you're here to save her," she said. "But she's been saving herself. And saving other people, too. People who don't get second chances." When I asked what she meant, Emily didn't answer. Instead, she drove us to the harbor. It was a maze of masts and weathered hulls, boats in every stage of decay and rebirth. I scanned everything, desperate for some trace of Lily. And then I found it. In an old maintenance log, tucked away on a dusty shelf, I saw it, a doodle in the margin. A tiny anchor. Surrounded by 13 dots. The same symbol Lily had drawn obsessively after our Alaska trip. On napkins. On notebooks. Even on her bedroom wall, hidden under layers of paint. My hand shook as I snapped a photo. Emily watched me carefully. "You're not the first person to come asking about her," she said. "But you might be the last." Before I could ask what she meant, an old dock worker shuffled over. He'd overheard our conversation. "You looking for the hermit girl?" he asked. My throat went dry. What did she look like? He squinted, thinking. Always wore a hoodie. Scar on her thigh. Right side. The words hit me like a punch. That scar was real. I'd seen it the day I found her in the bathroom, the line she'd carved into her skin spelling help. It was her. No question. Jack's phone buzzed suddenly, over and over, like a hive of angry bees. His face drained of color as he read the texts. Emily leaned over his shoulder, her jaw tightening. The messages were from an unlisted number. Threats. Warnings. Someone furious that Jack had broken their agreement. I didn't know who was on the other end, but it was clear Lily wasn't just hiding from our parents. There were others keeping her hidden. People who didn't want me anywhere near her. Emily pulled me aside, her voice low but urgent. "Listen to me." She had good reasons for disappearing. If you push too hard, you're going to ruin everything she built. Her words shook me. Because deep down, I knew she was right. Lily wasn't the same broken teenager I'd last seen. She'd built something. Something worth protecting. But I wasn't ready to let go. Not yet. That night, I convinced the marina office manager to let me check their security footage. I told him I was investigating a stolen part, spinning lies until he finally relented. Hours of grainy black and white video flickered across the screen. My eyes burned as I scanned frame after frame. And then, I saw her. A figure in an oversized hoodie, walking with a familiar limp, favoring her left side the way Lily always had after she twisted her ankle at 13. The hood covered her face, but I didn't need to see it. I knew. It was her. Alive. Right there, 2 weeks ago. Jack admitted something else then, his voice barely above a whisper. His father, Walter, the one who had first told Lily she had salt water in her veins. He hadn't died peacefully. He died helping someone escape. Jack wouldn't say who. But the look Emily shot him told me everything. It was connected to Lily. It had always been about her. That's when Emily finally told me her side of the story. 2 years earlier, after her first child, she'd fallen into a pit of postpartum depression. She'd joined an online support group, desperate for someone to talk to. And do you know who had been there? Lily. Not as herself, of course. Under an alias. But Emily knew. She said Lily had talked her through nights when she wanted to end it all. Had convinced her to keep living. Her voice trembled as she admitted, "If it weren't for your sister, I wouldn't be here. My daughter wouldn't be here." I didn't know what to say. Because that was Lily. Even drowning in her own pain, she'd found a way to save someone else. But if she could save Emily, why couldn't she let me save her? Jack finally confessed the last piece. He still had something of hers. A photograph. Proof she was alive. But he wouldn't show it. Not yet. He said it was leverage. And as his words sank in, I felt something dark twist in my stomach. Jack wasn't just protecting my sister. He was controlling her. Gatekeeping her life like he owned it. And that's when I realized my parents weren't the only ones Lily had needed to escape. But that wasn't the worst of it. Not even close. By the time the sun rose again, I knew I couldn't trust Jack. He kept pacing the docks like he owned them, phone glued to his hand, eyes darting between me and the harbor. He wanted me to believe he was protecting Lily, but I recognized the act. I'd seen it before. It was the same way my parents used to talk about her. Control disguised as concern. Manipulation wrapped in responsibility. I clenched my fists and told myself, I'm not letting him bury her twice. That afternoon, something strange happened. An elderly woman at the marine supply store thanked me after I helped her carry a heavy box to her truck. As she shut the tailgate, she leaned in closer and said, almost like a secret, "She was here last week. Bought prenatal vitamins." My chest tightened. "Are you sure?" The woman nodded. Looked exhausted. Moved slow. Like she was protecting something. Pregnant. My sister wasn't just alive. She was 8 months pregnant. And suddenly, all her disappearances, her obsession with survival gear, her constant supply runs, it all made sense. She hadn't been preparing for herself. She'd been preparing for someone else. A baby. When I confronted Jack, he snapped. His voice cracked as he insisted Lily was terrified of me, that my presence had triggered her panic attacks all over again. But I saw through him. He wasn't describing her fear. He was describing his own. Because if I found her, his control was gone. Emily saw it too. I could see the cracks forming in her loyalty to him. The way she flinched when he barked at her. The way she kept glancing at me like she was silently asking, "What if you're right?" That night, someone slid a boat key under my motel door. No note. Just a slip number etched on the float. When I checked the records, the slip belonged to a boat called 13 Anchors. The same name my sister had scrawled over and over in her notebooks. The same symbol she doodled beside her scar. She'd left it for me. I knew it. Still, the community around the harbor wasn't making things easy. Fuel suddenly became unavailable. The grocery store had supply issues. Everywhere I went, doors quietly closed in my face. One cashier actually told me flat out, "We protect our own." And that's when I realized something chilling. It wasn't just Jack. The entire harbor had been shielding her. But why? What had Lily built here that was worth this kind of silence? I got my answer 2 days later when I broke into Jack's office. The lock was pathetic, probably meant to look secure while really inviting snoopers. Inside, I found files stuffed in every drawer. Maps. Charts. Boat registrations under false names. And then, in a folder marked only with an anchor symbol, I found the truth. Lily had been running routes along the west coast. Monitoring weather. Coordinating passages. Every path matched something I'd seen in the news. Women escaping abusive marriages. Mothers vanishing with their kids before courts could force them back to violent exes. She wasn't just hiding. She was rescuing people. My little sister, the girl our parents dismissed as attention-seeking, had built a network of survival. An underground railroad of the sea. I should have felt proud. But instead, all I felt was fear. Because if she'd pulled this off for 5 years, then why had she stopped writing to Jack? Why had she let me find the coordinates? Unless she was in trouble. That same night, Marcus called me from Phoenix. His voice was shaky, but he admitted something I hadn't known. Every year on his birthday, Lily had texted him from a new number. Just one message. Always the same, "Still here. Don't stop fighting." But 6 months ago, the text stopped. Just like with Jack. The tension finally broke when Jack confronted me on the docks. His voice was raw, almost breaking, as he said, "You don't get it. She made me promise no one from Phoenix was ever supposed to find her. Not even you." I recorded the whole thing on my phone. His desperation. His bribe, $10,000 in cash if I left Alaska immediately. He thought he was protecting her. But all I saw was another man trying to control her story. The harbor master had been watching. And when I showed him the recording, I saw something shift. His daughter, it turned out, had been one of Lily's navigation students. And just like that, the tide turned. The community that had once closed ranks against me began to open. Fishermen nodded in quiet solidarity. A teacher slipped me notes about where Lily had been seen. Even Emily started asking me questions about what would happen if Lily actually wanted me in her life again. The walls were cracking. But time was running out. A storm front was moving in, and if Lily was really 8 months pregnant, she didn't have weeks. She didn't even have days. The coordinates weren't just a breadcrumb trail anymore. They were a lifeline. And if I didn't follow them now, I might lose her forever. But I had no idea what was waiting at the end. And it wasn't just Lily. It was the past. Our parents. Jack's betrayal. All of it. Colliding in one place. The morning we left for the coordinates, the harbor felt different. Fishermen who'd once avoided my eyes now clapped me on the shoulder. A small flotilla of 5 boats lined up behind mine, captains volunteering to escort me through the narrowing weather window. They didn't say it outright, but I knew. They weren't following me. They were following her. Because Lily had earned their loyalty in ways I couldn't yet understand. The island was small, barely a bump of green against the steel-grey horizon. But as we approached, I saw the signs, neat rows of vegetables, solar panels catching the last of the sun, smoke curling from a chimney. It wasn't just a hideout. It was a home. And then, there she was. She stepped out of a cabin slowly, one hand supporting her swollen belly, the other gripping a fishing rod like it doubled as a weapon. Her hair was longer, tangled from sea wind. Her skin was burned golden from the sun. But her eyes, those wide, unflinching eyes, were still Lily's. And around her wrist was the faded bracelet I'd made her in 7th grade. My throat closed. For years, I'd mourned a ghost. Now here she was, breathing, alive, standing 20 feet away from me. She stopped in her tracks, studying me. Not running. Not smiling. Just watching. Behind her, another woman appeared. Younger, protective, standing with a boat hook in her hand. Lily's ally. Her family. I stepped forward, slowly, and set something down on a driftwood log between us, the stuffed whale from her childhood. Marcus had carried it across the ocean just for this moment. Her face cracked, just slightly. Her lips trembled. It was her. No doubt. But before I could speak, the sound of an engine shattered everything. Jack's boat came barreling around the point. And he wasn't alone. Our parents' voices echoed from his phone on speaker, sharp and demanding. They were already on their way north. Lily staggered, gripping her belly. A contraction. Too soon. Too fast. Her friend rushed to her side. Jack stumbled onto the sand, waving the phone like a weapon. They want to talk to you. You owe them that much. Mom's shrill voice pierced the air. Sarah, we're your parents. We decide what's best for you. Dad's tone was colder. If you don't come willingly, we'll have the law on our side. Fraud, kidnapping, abandonment, we'll bury you in court. The word sliced through me. Because after everything, they still didn't get it. She hadn't faked her death to spite them. She'd done it to survive them. Lily doubled over again, crying out in pain. Her water had broken. Her friend shouted for help. Without thinking, I moved. We formed a barrier, me, Marcus, even Emily who had arrived with her daughter, blocking Jack from the cabin. He raged, demanded, pushed, but we didn't budge. Inside, through a thin window, I saw Lily on a makeshift bed, sweat slicking her face as her friend coached her through contractions. Her screams cut through the cabin walls, raw and primal. And then, finally, a baby's cry pierced the storm. A boy. Alive. She named him Earl Phoenix. After the man who'd saved her, and the city she'd escaped. By the time our parents' rental car finally crunched across the beach, it was too late. Mom stormed toward the cabin, her heels sinking in the sand. Dad followed, already talking about custody, guardianship, control. But when the door opened just enough for them to glimpse Lily inside, holding her newborn son to her chest, whispering his name, their words faltered. Because for the first time, they saw her. Not as their daughter. Not as a broken girl. But as a mother. And they realized, in that moment, that they no longer had any power here. Jack tried one last time to claim authority, shouting that he had made promises, that he was her protector. But Emily stepped forward with documents proving his financial exploitation of the network. Her voice didn't waver. You don't protect her, Jack. You cage her. The harbor master backed her up, his presence sealing the deal. Jack's power crumbled in the sand. Our parents left as the sun set, their voices hoarse from useless threats. They would never return. Jack watched them go, shoulders slumped. By morning, he was gone too. Lily survived the birth. More than that, she thrived. With her chosen family at her side, she raised Earl Phoenix surrounded by the ocean that had always called to her. She invited me to stay, not in her cabin, but on a neighboring plot. A condition. A boundary. Proof that she was willing to let me in, but only on her terms. I built my own small shelter, teaching navigation classes alongside her, helping the network she had built. We never heard from our parents again, except for one letter, an attempt at reconciliation. She burned it without opening it. Because Lily had learned what family really means. It's not about blood. It's about who shows up when the storms come. And as I watched her son take his first steps on the same sand where I once thought I'd lost her forever, I finally understood. The coordinates in that letter weren't just a way back to her. They were a map to the truth. Sometimes, to truly live, you have to disappear.